Hey guys, back with a new video. Today we're going to be talking about what you should be doing in your first week of Battlerite to prepare yourself to enter the arena. So the very first thing you'll do in Battlerite is the tutorial. However, you only have to complete the basic tutorial to allow yourself to fight against other players or do other game modes, and you don't have to complete the rest of the tutorial, which is a small campaign adventure. But realistically, you really should, as the rest of the tutorial teaches you little things about Battlerite that might not be immediately obvious if you don't do the tutorial. Once you're done the tutorial, the best thing you should probably do is go to the collection, go to the champions, and look at all the champions and try to identify one or two champions that you're really interested in. If you're completely free to play right now and you haven't purchased or won't purchase the All Champions pack, then it's a good idea to identify one that's currently free to play and one that is unlockable, so that you can have a champion to aim for as a goal and have a champion that you can practice in the meantime. And don't worry if you don't really know what the champions do, because if you click on the champions, you can practice them in the playground and you can try them out even if you don't own them. So if you're really interested in the new champion that just released, Destiny the Sky Ranger, then you can just click, go practice in the playground, and have some fun in the playground, figure out what her abilities do. So, the free champions, usually there's a decent variety. There's a few supports, two supports, two melee, and two range usually, with one or two wildcards. So try and select one that suits your playstyle or suits what you want in the game. If there's one that looks really, really cool and you think that you want to unlock them first, for me that was Raigon, then try them out, see how you like them, and then make the decision after trying out all the champions you really like. So once you've picked a champion that you like and that you can currently play, so a free-to-play champion or a champion that you managed to purchase, then it's time to start practicing with them. So first you should go to the playground, which is the same place as if you just press on the champion and try in the playground. And here you can figure out what their abilities do, figure out what their EX abilities do, and figure out how the champion feels and how they play. After this, it's a good idea to jump into casual. And this video will be mostly focused on 3v3 modes. 2v2 is less balanced than 3v3 and has its own distinct meta, whereas 3v3, pretty much everyone is viable. So, with that out of the way, jump into casuals and play a bunch of casuals. So, casual is a great place to figure out how Battlerite plays, figure out good tricks, good little things, and figure out how the game is really played, and if the game's for you even. Try to stick to 1 to 3 champions. Obviously, try out a few different champions. If you are getting smashed on the first champion you picked, try out another champion. Maybe you ignored a champion, for example. Maybe you looked at Sirius and said, he doesn't look cool at all, he's just some monk. And then you play Sirius and you go, oh my god, this guy's actually amazing, because Sirius is amazing, and really fun to play, and really easy to play. So don't feel like after you've chosen your first champion that you want to try and play, that you're stuck with them. I played Pearl a lot at first, before I switched to Croak. And then once I got Raigon, I switched to Raigon, but I still go back to play Croak. And I've also tried other sports, and I found out that while I do love Pearl, I'm actually a better player with Older, or Sirius, than I am with Pearl. So it's all about finding the champions that really suit your playstyle. After you've found these champions, focus on learning the champion, and figure out how the champion plays, how they fare against other champions, and little tips and tricks you can do with the champion. By learning just one champion at a time, you actually learn all the champions faster, as when you're playing just Raigon, you don't have to worry about remembering which ability does what and how this. You just have to worry about how Raigon plays, and you can focus on learning what each of the other champions does to Raigon and to you, and you'll learn how these champions play. If you're playing Raigon and Iva and Pearl and Blossom and Rukon and Jade and Rook all in your first 2 days, each match you're probably going to have to figure out, okay, what does this character do on their E again, what is their space, and whatnot. Following off that, there's a common set of controls for all champions. So Stunlock has tried to create each champion with a fairly similar template for their kits. That's not to say all their kits are identical or that they all play the same, but all the champions have their auto attack on left mouse button, their main damage attack, which usually corresponds to their role on the right mouse button. For example, ranged champions often have some sort of form of charged snipe that builds up damage or range as they charge it, or it takes a while to charge and then fires a powerful shot. So I'll just go to the abilities here to illustrate my point. Then your space is usually a jump. For most champions, the space will be a jump, and Q will be a defensive ability. E can kind of vary between all the champions. It's usually got some form of crowd control or utility on it, but it does vary between each different champion. And then R and F are where each champion is truly unique, as F is your ultimate, and R is a special energy ability. Then, of course, each champion also has EX abilities, where if you hold Shift, you get a new ability on two different abilities in their kit, two of the base abilities, not R or F. And that's pretty much it. So for most champions, you'll figure space is some sort of movement ability, or sometimes it's a form of shield or other form of defensive ability. Q is also usually a defensive ability, usually a stealth on champions that have it. And then R and B is usually a dash on melees, usually a heal on supports, and usually some form of powerful ranged attack on ranged. Of course, this isn't set in stone. Different champions will have different things. For example, if we go to Lucy, you'll notice her space is not a dash, it's actually barrier, and her dash is on R, and she has to pay energy for it. So her space is still a defensive ability, but it's a barrier, and it can be put on a target ally or herself. And then certain supports don't actually have their heal on right mouse button. For example, Poloma, her heal is actually on her left mouse button, and her right mouse button is other side, which makes a target ally or herself invulnerable. And then her space is a dash, but it's a sort of delayed dash that can be interfered with. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but as a general guideline, you can kind of get used to other champions once you figure out how the buttons are laid out in the game. And so going back to learning your champions, you'll also learn how certain champions interact with each other. For example, if you are maining Shifu loves to go in. So if you get a Croak, a Bako, a Rook, or a Raigon on your team, or a Freya, pretty much most melees, a Sirius for a support, for example, you know that you can probably just go in hardcore and try to destroy one enemy at a time. If you don't get any of them on your team and you instead get something like a Jade and, a Poloma, then you're probably going to have to focus a bit more on peeling for your squishy range champions, unless they can handle it themselves and tell you to go in. So it's all about learning how the champions work. Once you feel confident in playing a champion, this could be after 2 or 3 games, or it could be after 10, 20, or 30, then you can feel free to go into ranked. Now, you don't have to play ranked, but ranked is probably the best place to find serious gameplay, as well as figure out your proper ranking. So currently I'm gold 2. I'll probably go up fairly soon. I'm hoping to hit platinum in the next week. But gold 2 is probably a decent representative of where I am with the champions that I currently play. So once you learned your champion, it's time to learn how the game plays. So the most important thing in this game are outs. And what an out is an out is an escape. Your outs are the way you can get out or relieve pressure. So we'll go to Raigon here, because Raigon's a very easy champion. He's very easy to pick up and do well with. Raigon's outs the big ones are his Q, which is an omnidirectional parry that he can then redirect attacks in the direction of his cursor with, and a long-range jump that also does pretty hefty damage in Heavenly Strike. Apart from that, he can also use his Dragon Palm to throw people away, or try to use his right mouse button Retribution to perform a small dash just to get out of the limits of someone's range, or to get into them and start attacking them. So if you use all your outs, you are now a sitting duck, which means anyone that wants to can just come start hitting you, and all you can do is try to hit them back. But if they still have their outs, like if you go to attack a Raigon, and you've used all your outs already, and he's got his parry up, he can just throw his parry up, stun you if you're a melee, or just reflect all your attacks back at you if you're a ranged, cancel his parry, and start wailing on you. And until your outs come back up, you have no way to escape this. So if you see someone blow their escapes, now is the time to punish. Conversely, if you blow your escapes, now is the time you can get punished. So a mistake a lot of new players make is always, especially on melees, just jumping right into the fight and trying to use their jump offensively all the time. And sometimes this is the right move. Other times it's not the right move, and you really need to make sure that, especially if they've got, for example, multiple melees, that you're not wasting your escapes getting into the fight, so spacing into the fight, and then having no way to get out if the tide turns on you. If they get a stun off and all of a sudden you take a lot of damage and you want to retreat so your healer can heal you up, but you already used your space to jump in and your parry got put in cooldown from some form of AoE that bypassed it, then you are going to take a lot of it. You could even die just because you use space to jump into the fight. And it's the same with enemies. If you see a Shifu use his counter, get nothing out of it, then use his space to try and get closer to you, jump on him. If you see a Croak that uses both his jumps and his dash to get into your team, and that he used his camouflage to reset his autos, jump on him. Now is the time to punish. So if outs are king, the orb is the prince. So if we just go back to practice here, go to the playground, the orb in every match will always be right in the center of the match. And you can see this circle right here. As this circle fills, the orb will, once the circle is full, the orb will appear. And then both teams really want to fight over this orb, because this orb gives you health regeneration, gives you max health back. It's one of the only things in the game that can do this. And it gives you energy. And the amount of energy it gives you increases if you're the last person left. So if you want to do a turnaround, say that the enemy team has killed off all your teammates, both your teammates are dead, and you're the last one left, but say it's only a 1v2 and they're both, somewhat low. If you can steal the orb, you can probably get your ultimate back fairly easily, and then use your ultimate to turn the tide and beat the enemy. Or you can use the energy to use EX abilities or your R. Basically, getting the orb is extremely important to winning the game. If one team gets all the orbs and the other team gets none, it's probably likely that the team that gets the orbs is going to win the game. And like you can see, right there, it filled up a full 25% bar of my energy right there. And energy, so I guess I should explain that now. So your EX abilities, which are the abilities you get when you press shift, so you can see that my left mouse button and my E both change if I press shift, as well as your R and your ultimate, they all have little bars under them. And that bar is an energy cost. So these abilities are stronger than normal abilities. For example, if I use my shift E there, it'll stun anyone that tries to leave it, which is pretty powerful, especially because it's AoE. And my R is a powerful explosive on Destiny. So these are more powerful abilities, but they cost energy. And you build energy by dealing damage to enemy heroes, by healing your team, or by stealing the orb, or getting these little sort of health orbs that are on the ground. You don't get energy from the health orbs, but you do get energy from the energy orbs. And the health orbs obviously give you health. So a lot of new players don't really see that these exist, and these can really make your life a lot easier, especially if you're trying to retreat from the fight for a bit. It can relieve some pressure on your healer if you're able to go get these orbs instead of having to run over to your healer and get them to heal you every time. So the orb is the prince, because outs are king, but the orb is very important. If you can win the orb, it is sometimes, in some games, it's worth using your ultimate just to secure the orb. And keep track on your hero of abilities that are good for stealing the orb. On Jade, for example, same with on Destiny, and actually on quite a lot of ranged heroes, most of them have a very powerful attack on their right mouse button. So with Destiny, if I hit that down to 28, and then do a fully charged right mouse button, I can do 32 damage. And Jade, with the right traits, can do 44. Not sure if Destiny actually has that. Yeah, she actually does. So using this, you can secure the orb way before some other heroes can, using their autos or other abilities. So if you see the orb's going to come up, try and save your powerful hits for right as it's for once it's up. If you're Jade or Destiny here, and you have your right mouse button available, once the orb hits around here, try to save that unless it's very important to the fight that's ongoing, because that will allow you to take the orb. Just like using your outs, if the enemy team sees that you've used your powerful abilities to attack them instead of trying to take the orb, then they can now punish you for that by using their powerful abilities to take the orb, while your team has to try and stop that by disrupting it. And you should also body block for the orb. So the orb is so important that using your body to block for the orb, so if there was an enemy right here shooting at the orb, if I go up right here and attack the orb, they're going to be attacking me instead of the orb, and I'm going to get health back. So as long as you don't take too much damage, body blocking for the orb can actually be pretty good. So those are the basics of Battlerite. Know your champion, know your champion's outs, try to learn the other champion's outs as you're learning your champion, and try to go for the orb while remembering the little things on the ground. But there are a lot of advanced things in Battlerite as well. So knowing the outs is one thing. However, a lot of champions are fairly predictable when it comes to using their outs. So let's swap over to Shifu for this. Or actually, we'll go to Raigon. Raigon's pretty... Oh, oops. Not what I want to do. Raigon is pretty simple for this as well. So you go to the playground. So a lot of champions will have fairly similar patterns when it comes to using their outs. So a lot of Raigon players, they'll jump in, they'll swing around a bit, they'll acquire... So Raigon and Shifu, as well as a few others such as Bako, have a stack system on their left mouse button, where every time they hit, they build a stack up to 3, and then Shifu has something that can make it 4, one of his Battlerites. And this stack system enhances the power as well as reduces the cooldown of their right mouse button, which is a dash. So with Raigon, if you've only got 1, you only do 14 damage. And let's just try it with 0 here. So the base damage is 11. But every stack adds, I believe it's 3 bonus damage per stack, and you also heal yourself for every weapon charge stack as well, which is pretty big. So for Raigon, what they'll try to do usually is they'll jump in, they'll hit 1, 2, 3, do that, and then they'll usually use parry. So different Raigons will vary this a bit. Some of them will jump in and immediately use their right mouse button, their retribution. Some of them will jump in and then they'll try to do other things. But for the most part, once they use retribution, now is the time that they usually want to reset the fight, because if you have your outs up, you can escape. So after they use retribution, they'll hit parry. So as soon as they use retribution, if you notice that they don't use autos after that, they'll hit parry, and you just wait it out. You stand in front of them, their parry expires, and then now it's your turn to attack them. And also, if you have a parry, you can wait for their parry to be about to expire, and then hit your own parry. And a lot of Raigons will like to take a Battlerite, where after it, they get Spinning Slash. So the parry expires, and they do a quick burst of damage with a stun attached to it. So that cannot happen if they cancel the parry, and I'll explain canceling in a bit. So if they use parry, once the full thing expires, the Spinning Slash will go out. And if you hit your own parry at that point, you can now stun them. And if you use Spinning Slash your own parry, you can stun them for attempting it, and then you can stun them with your own Spinning Slash, and they cannot punish you. So learning what the patterns that a lot of champions like to use their abilities in will allow you to punish them harder. If you know that, for example, Raigon that you're fighting always uses Heavenly Strike into Retribution, into 3 autos, into Retribution, into parry, then as soon as they do the Heavenly Strike, you can auto them 3 times. As soon as they get their 3rd auto off, use your defensive ability to stop the retribution, as that's their biggest hit, which will also heal them and do more damage. Then you can either reset the fight by spacing away, because you know they use their space to come in, or you can press the attack and then space away once they try for the second retribution, or when they're in the middle of their parry at the end there, because now you've used your parry and they can get that stun off if they battle-righted for it. So learning the patterns of an enemy hero, or learning the patterns of a specific player in the game over the course of the game, can allow you to punish them for being predictable. And at the same time, you can try to vary up your own patterns. For one of my bad habits is I always like to use that at 3 stacks. But sometimes it's good to use it to just initiate, because you reduce the cooldown every time you hit with it. So if you initiate onto it, then you'll have it back pretty quickly. And because you used such a low cooldown ability, if you initiate onto them, so they're here, you initiate onto them, they space away, you can follow with your space, and then you'll have it back really quickly as soon as you hit 1 or 2 auto attacks. So another quick thing to note is sticking together with your team. So it's not absolutely mandatory to stick together with your team. For some heroes, such as Croak, it can even be better to try and strike it on your own, but things change from game to game, and things change from the enemy team composition. So when you load up into a game, the first things you need to ask yourself are, what is the enemy team composition, and how am I equipped to deal with that? For Raigon, he has a few different Battlerites that change based on the team composition. If they have more than one ranged, I like to take Binding Light, just because it lets me have a snare on my right mouse button. And a snare in Battlerite is usually a fading snare. So what that means is it's not a full snare. It's more of a slow, I guess, would be the word. And the slow decreases over time. So it starts off at a really high percentage and then quickly decreases as the snare wears out. But this allows you to stick to them just long enough to get your next attacks off and reapply it with right mouse button, which is great for catching ranged. Against melee, the spinning slash is a great one to have, because it lets you really, if they're trying to jump on you and burst you down, you throw out the parry, reflect a few of their attacks at them, and then stun them again as you run away. And against double melee, I take that and Invigorate, which heals you at the end of your parry as well. So my parry ends, I spinning slash, and I heal, which is really big. So if I just go over here, actually, I can show against the thing that attacks. So it hits me, get close to it, spinning slash, and I heal up. So looking at their team composition and selecting Battlerites that are appropriate for it is big. And then that can also dictate if you need to stick with your team or not. If they have a team of 3 ranged, sticking with your team allows them to focus their firepower on you. If they're all sticking together, then it can be better to stick with your team and all drive them all at once as a death ball. But if they're split up and you're a melee, try to jump on one of them and just keep them out of the fight for as long as possible. Just keep focusing on them. Make sure they don't punish you too hard, because if you fuck up, they will kill you just by kiting. But for the most part, it's not too risky as a melee, especially as someone like Raigon, who with his that Battlerite on Retribution is so easy to stick onto ranged. It's just really easy to punish them if they stay away from their team. So considering your team comp as well as the enemies is important. If you've got double melee, you're probably going to be the team that's diving in. And if you've got double ranged, you're probably going to be the team that's letting them come to you and kiting them backwards as you fight. Of course, that strategy has a risk, because if you're kiting them backwards, you run the risk of kiting away from the orb. So if you're right here and the enemy melee come from here and you're backing up while you're shooting them and they back off, they then secure the orb while you're running back in and then re-engage on you with extra energy and more health from the orb. So it can be risky to kite too far back, so sometimes you have to kite laterally. You have to kite around the circle. And if you get split up, they can jump on you. So it's really all about figuring out what your team composition can do, what the enemy composition can do, and identifying the best route of attack or defense to deal with both compositions effectively. And pick both Battlerites accordingly. Now, one final thing. So I'll end the video after this. But one final thing to notice is you can cancel abilities, even auto attacks. Because in this game, auto attacks are spells. So if you get silenced, you cannot auto attack. So you can't cancel everything. You can't cancel Raigon's right mouse button. You can't cancel his space. You can cancel his R. And I don't think you can cancel his ultimate, no. But cancel is by default the C button. And I've rebound that to one of my side mouse buttons just so it's easy. Because canceling can be very important, especially as a melee against people with parries. As Raigon, if I parry someone, another melee, and I accurately aim it back at them, I will stun them. I don't even need the Battlerite at the end of it. If I take off this Battlerite here, you will just stun any melee that tries to melee attack you, and you reflect onto them with parry. So if I'm fighting another Raigon and he activates parry, I want to stop attacking. So there's a few ways I can accomplish this. For the first attack, I usually just aim my cursor away from them. And if I'm fast enough, I can usually do that. And if sometimes, as you get more used to the game, you can just cancel the auto just outright if you have the fast enough reaction times. And while doing it for autos is somewhat important, it's not that big a deal. However, something that's really big is on key moves such as Jade's Snipe or, for example, Raigon's Seismic Shock. If you cancel that before you throw it, you can bait stuff out. For example, Jade's Snipe is one of the most fun abilities in the game for me to reflect with my parry, because you'll usually get between 36 and 44 damage, as well as a stun onto it. It's ridiculously good to parry. You take off a full bar of their max health with it, and it's just so strong. So as a Jade, if I throw that out and the Raigon sees it, he'll parry it. But if you pretend to throw it out and the Raigon throws up his parry, and then you cancel it at the last second, then the Raigon wastes his parry, and all of a sudden one of his outs is gone. And if he's already jumped, both his outs are gone, and you can punish him so hard for that. So canceling is huge, and it only puts it on a 1 second cooldown as well. So you can cancel multiple times, especially at the beginning of a fight. So just as you're coming in from the summoning platform, it can be good to, if you see them kind of reacting cautiously towards it, and sometimes you should just release it. Just throw it out. Just do the damage, because it's only cooldowns in Battlerite are insanely short. The longest cooldown I can think of is something like 15 seconds, maybe a bit more, 20, 22 seconds for something really big. 15 seconds is the only one I can think of off the top of my head, and that's mostly our abilities. So using cancel on something big, especially something that the enemy cares about, is huge. And learning to cancel is a pretty big thing. Like, just knowing how to cancel will make things in Battlerite, I won't say a lot easier. It's not like knowing how to cancel is instantly going to make you soar up in ranks, but just knowing how to cancel, and that canceling is a viable thing you can do, will allow you to have more paths to victory in a game, because you can all of a sudden start baiting out parries. You can bait out abilities, or you can stop yourself from getting punished by a certain ability, by not hitting into a parry, or just, there's a lot of different things you can do with cancel. It's a very versatile tool, and it's a part of the toolkit that is often underlooked by new players, or even just they don't know about it at all. So knowing how to cancel, definitely something you should at least try to pick up. It's something I don't do enough. For the most part, I only cancel my E on Raigon and occasionally an auto attack if I'm trying to bait a parry out. So just knowing how to cancel, big for your game. Anyways guys, that's what you should be doing in your first week of Battlerite. Try to select champions you'll be good at, or that you want to play, or that you want to unlock. Try them out in the practice grounds, see how you like them. Try them out in casual to learn them, as well as learning other heroes. Try not to play too many champions at once after you've settled on some champions you actually want to play, just because it'll make the game a little harder to learn for you. And once you've settled on the champions, learn their outs, learn how the game plays, learn how the enemy's outs work, punish those that use their outs. Try not to use your outs too, I don't know, without thinking too much so that you can't get punished. And then just start trying to pick up advanced little tips and tricks as you play the game. Anyways, guys, that's your first week of Battlerite, and hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.